All right. So good afternoon. Okay, so now where I come from in the Marine Corps, that was weak and undisciplined. So let's try that again. Good afternoon. That was much better. We're going to do like another group participation here in just a second, but I'll show you what that's all about. By the way, let me ask you a question, which is this. What do you do when you have 10 seconds to live? What do you do when you have 10 seconds to live? I was actually, what'd you say? Pray. Yeah, this is the number one answer, by the way. I was faced with that decision back on a hot July night in 1999. Now, some of you know from the bio that I was in the Marine Corps. If you're in the Marine Corps and you fly fighters like F-18s, you know who you train with for like the first 3 years of your entire training? The Navy, okay? And I'm not even going to do any of the Navy jokes today. What I will simply tell you is that for 3 years, I flew in training with the Navy with an instructor in my backseat. And then I went to go land on the aircraft carrier at night for the very first time, and I was all alone. Now, I don't know why they do that. I think it's like a risk mitigation thing. It's like if this young man's going to die, he might as well die alone. But did you know, by the way, did you know there's 9 countries that land on aircraft carriers? England, India, China, just to name a few. But the only country that does it at night is the United States. Do you guys know that's amazing? So some people call that courage. Some people call that bravery. I call it the dumbest thing. Look, it's dark. It's really dark. Like, it's black. There's no lights. You know, there may be some stars, but that's about it. And the stop on the end of the carrier deck is the most violent stop. Like, people talk about the carrier takeoff being violent. The stop feels like your face is flying through a windshield, okay? And it's dark and it's small, too. It's like maybe a little bigger than this room, but not that much bigger than this room. It's about 300 yards, about 3 football fields long. You have to land an airplane. To put that into context, like if you came in yesterday on an airplane like I did, like I came in on American, okay? It wasn't even my own airplane. So when you come in on American, that airport out at Knoxville, did you guess, is that where you flew in, right? When you land on that runway, there's about 9,000 feet of runway. When you land on the aircraft carrier, there's about 300 feet. So you got this young student who's alone and afraid. It's dark. The landing's violent and the landing area is very small, and they expect you to do that all by yourself. And so through training, of course, you get out there and you finally take off, and then the Navy does something called comfort time. So for about 30 minutes, as a young student, I was like 25 at the time, as a young student, you're just flying in circles for like 30 minutes, and the purpose is to get you comfortable. At least that's what they say. But I can tell you I was far from comfortable because I was about to go and try to kill myself, and here's how I tried to kill myself. So when you're descending behind the aircraft carrier, so for example, at night, they'll put you about 12 miles behind the carrier. You're descending about 1,500 feet. You'll descend all the way down to the carrier. Eventually, you'll pick up the ball. You probably saw Top Gun. How many of you saw Top Gun, by the way? How many of you saw the new Top Gun? Very much more realistic, the second one, just so you know. The first one was a great movie. Had nothing to do with anything accurate as far as fighter pilot stuff goes. The second one was actually pretty accurate. Like, there were a couple little wonky things in the movie, but it was pretty accurate. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm back tomorrow, just so you know. Today's like a little short intro, so I get you for like almost 2 hours tomorrow, right? Oh man, I'm going to be writing my talk tonight, just throwing all the good stuff, okay? So maybe tomorrow we'll talk about the real Top Gun movie, which, by the way, that way, if you're tempted to leave early, like maybe you've got a flight, you got to get out of here, change the flight, because you're going to want to come and see the Top Gun thing, okay? So where was I before I so rudely interrupted myself? What was I talking about? Oh, I was landing on an aircraft carrier. So you start about 1,500 feet, you come all the way down to the carrier, and on this particular day, there was a pretty significant problem. For me, that's because starting at about 700 feet above the water, ending at about 1,200 feet above the water was a very thick, overcast cloud layer. And that cloud layer would be the source of a major issue. Now, it shouldn't have been. I trained for years to be able to fly through the clouds, land on the back of the aircraft carrier, no problem at all. But as I descended into the clouds, now at about 10 miles behind the aircraft carrier, and at about 1,100 feet above the ocean of the Pacific Ocean, a condition came upon me which can only be described as vertigo. Now, I don't know if you've ever experienced vertigo before, but if you were in this room and you felt vertigo, it's a very dizzy, disorienting feeling. It actually can be very nauseating too. But like when you're in a room like this, that's kind of it. But let me tell you, when you're in an airplane that's flying about 350 miles an hour, 1,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, vertigo can kill you in an instant. And what I felt in my airplane was a gentle rolling sensation to the left. Now, when your airplane moves to the left, what do? Take the control stick and move it to the right. As I went to take my control stick and move it to the right, I looked up at my primary display. In the F-18, that's called the HUD, which stands for Heads-Up Display. On the primary display, that tells you if you're climbing, descending, turning left, or turning right, and at least according to that display, I'm flying perfectly straight and level. Now, this rolling sensation picks up now harder to the left as I go to move my control stick to the right. I look up again at my heads-up display, which I'm pretty sure is broken at this point, and it shows me that at least according to this instrument, I'm flying perfectly straight and level. Now, in this instant, the rolling sensation now picks up so hard to the left that in my mind, what I'm seeing is the airplane is in a hard turn, eventually in a spin. I feel like at any moment the clouds are going to go away, the ocean's going to show up, it's going to be unrecoverable. My airplane, my $40 million airplane, and my 25-year-old body will go slamming into the Pacific Ocean there, thereby ending my life and ending that airplane's life as well. And it's just as I go to move my control stick now violently to the right that I hear a voice. Now, it wasn't an out loud voice. It was the voice of training. You ever heard that voice before? That voice, some of you are pilots know that voice told me 3 words. Do you know what those words were? Trust your instruments. Trust your instruments. That had been told to my instructor, by his instructor, by her instructor, all the way back to the beginning of instrumented flight. My instructor told me, my call sign, by the way, was Head Russ. My instructor told me, Head, you are going to fail in this airplane. By the way, he was right. I failed thousands of times, literally thousands of times, made 100 mistakes per flight probably if I had to add it all up. But he said, that instrument will remain rock solid. And you know what? He was right. I flew almost 1,500 combat hours, and not one time did that heads-up display fail me. And even if it did, I had a backup. And so I'm sitting in the cockpit trying to figure out if I'm going to trust myself or trust my training. Trust everything that I knew to be true, or to trust my systems. The training that I've been taught by my instructor over and over and over again. And by the way, when you saw the first Top Gun movie, you heard Maverick say, up there, you trust your instincts. You got to trust your instincts. And I will tell you, Maverick would be dead 100 times by trusting his instincts. That was horrible advice. Literally, like the first thing they teach you in fighter pilot school is like, remember what Maverick said? Yeah, none of that's right, okay? So you do not trust your instincts. I don't know how many young Americans went off into life like you just got to trust your instincts. No, you don't, okay? You don't trust your instincts. You trust your training. You trust your systems. And that night, I trusted my training, and it made all the difference in the world. Broke out of the clouds at 700 feet, saw the back of the aircraft carrier. Whoo! I breathed a big sigh of relief. And that lasted for about a half a second until I realized, now I got to do what? Now I got to land on this thing. I just about killed myself. Okay, my forehead, literally, there's sweat pouring off my forehead onto my oxygen mask. My feet are bouncing off the cockpit floor. I'm so nervous that I had just about to die. My stomach's in a knot, and now I've got about 35 seconds, so I land on the back of an aircraft carrier for the very first time at night. All right, now, do you want the Iceman story? Like, you want to make up the story about how I'm the second coming of Iceman, or do you want the real story? Which one do you want, the Iceman story or the real story? I can do either one. Okay, I'm going to tell you the real story. The real story goes like this. On the aircraft carrier, there's 4 wires. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your job as a pilot is to land the airplane perfectly between the second and third wire. To catch the third wire, that's a perfect landing. Perfect landing. By the way, it is not only a perfect landing, but it's a miracle. It's an engineering miracle. It's a physiological miracle. Everything about it is miraculous. You land it between the second and third wire, catch the third wire, you stop. You're 150 miles an hour, 3 seconds later, a second and a half later, you're stopped. Everything's a miracle. The Navy, when the Navy gives you a grade, the best grade you can get in the Navy is okay. It literally, the 2 letters, okay. It's literally like, you just did something no one else can do. You just did something that 20 years later you're going to be talking about in front of a group of people in Tennessee. Let me tell you this story. And the Navy's like, I was okay. Okay, so like the best grade you can get is okay. If you land a little short, you land between the first and the second wire. That's not a good landing. They call that a fair landing. So best you can do is okay. Next one is fair. And then behind that, anybody want to guess behind that what the grade is? Poor. Okay, so it goes poor, fair, okay. This is the whole standard of excellence. So if you land and you catch the first wire, you're too low. It means you're too low, and that's dangerous. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't catch the third wire. I definitely didn't catch the second wire. I did catch the first wire, but I landed way back here. Okay, I'm talking like way, way back there. And the carrier deck is metal, and the hook is metal. So when the two of them meet and hang out for a while, there's sparks that fly everywhere. Okay, and that kind of landing is called a sparkler. That means that there's a sparks flying down the entire runway deck. And what makes this worse is all my buddies were standing on a little platform called Vulture's Row. Vulture's Row is where all the pilots go when they're not flying to make fun of their other pilot buddies, okay? So I did the worst landing that night. I did something below poor, whatever below poor was, some awful word. I'm sure that the Navy cooked up. I did a 54-foot, I measured it the next day, 54-foot sparkler into the one wire. Worst landing they had seen that night. You have a taxi director. Taxi director wears a yellow shirt. They're called yellow shirts. Normally when you land, the yellow shirt's standing right there. When I landed, yellow shirt's like 300 yards away. Okay, that's how bad everything was. And did I care? No, why did I not care? This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I was alive. Why? Because I am the second coming of Iceman, people. You have to get used to this part of the talk. Because you are the second coming of Iceman. No, I'm alive because of what? Because of an amazing training system and one really good idea. Would you agree that trust your instruments is a really good idea? I mean, it's like not only just a good idea, it's a life-saving idea. It's a brilliant idea when implemented. By the way, not worth the paper it's printed on if you're not going to take action on it. But once you take action on that idea, it turns into gold for you. And as we start our time together, today I get a little warm up with you, which is awesome. And then tonight we're going to go up to the mountain. We're going up the mountain. We're going to go up to the mountain and have some dinner. I never, by the way, I'm amazed at how many people are in this town. This small little town. I'm no offense or anything. I grew up in Philly. I live in San Diego. I've flown over Tennessee a few times. I've been here a couple times for a football game. We used to fly in and out of McGee Tyson. I didn't even know this town was as like popular as this town is. We're going to go up to the mountain, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you tomorrow about building some systems. My goal for you is really simple. Number one, I want you to make more money. Number two, I want you to have a bigger impact in the world. Number three, I want you to be able to do that by building your business and your lifestyle around a business around your lifestyle and your family, not just your family and your lifestyle around you. Did you catch all those things? What's the first thing I said, by the way? Make more money. And I just want to be really clear about this. When I talk about this concept of money. For some reason, here in our American culture, we like whisper that. But you know, like I'll give you an example. When I was first in flight school, I had an old crusty instructor. If you ever go to flight school, you always have these old crusty like Vietnam vintage instructors, okay? Dude's got like bullet holes in him, okay? And this guy, he stood before the whole students. We're all these young, impressionable students, you know? You got the old crusty Vietnam vet with the bad language and the halitosis, okay? And he stood before this group and he said to us young flight students, he said, "What makes a plane fly?" First question he asked, he said, "What makes a plane fly?" Does anybody know, by the way, what makes a plane fly? Like, what makes a plane fly? Lift over the wings, right? That's why I was like, hey, lift. He said, that is not the right answer. And I was like, all right, well, that's what I thought it was, but I'm new, you know? Air pressure, okay? Somebody said that. Anybody have any other guesses? The engine, the pilot. All those were wrong, he said. I thought they were all good. They're all really good answers, by the way. They're really good answers. Do you know what he said? Money. I thought that was a pretty appropriate answer, actually, when you think about it, because you have to buy the plane. You know what I'm saying? You have to maintain the plane, and then you have to put gas in the plane. And if you don't have that, you actually don't have any of the other stuff. Like, you don't even get to the part where the lift goes over the wings. And I thought my first lesson in flight school was about what makes a plane fly, and I thought he was going to do like a whole physics thing, and what he said was money, right? And so is money important? Yeah, it's really important. Actually, is it the most important thing? Probably not. Right, but it's on the top list. Like my old friend Zig Ziglar. Do you guys remember Zig Ziglar? Zig Ziglar once said, "If someone says to you money is not important, they will lie about other things too." Okay, so like it is actually really important, and it's a good thing to talk about. For some reason in our culture, and I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. For some reason in our culture, we like hush the stuff. We don't talk about it like it's like important, but it's really important. Okay, I just want to say that I honor what you do. I honor what you do so much that I wrote about you in my latest book, and I'm going to tell you about that. I didn't do it on purpose knowing that I was going to come here, but I actually talked about insurance I'm not even kidding you, in this book about talking to God about your business. I talked about insurance and the importance of it in the book. Crazy, right? Like I didn't even plan on doing it. I'll tell you that part of the book so that you can read it tonight when we're done with dinner, okay? All right, so really quickly, I'm going to just give you a little background, tell you a little bit of my story, give you one encouragement as we go out. Let me check I got my timer here because I told him, I said, I'm not going to go long. All right, so little story, and then we'll get into some just like really quick teaching, and then you'll take a break and get into the rest of the content. By the way, I'll be here for the rest of the day, maybe gone for a little hour or something like that this afternoon, just to get some fresh air, and then I'll be with you tonight, and then tomorrow, and then I'm closing out the session tomorrow. So I'll be around. Love to get to know you a little bit. This is rare for me, so A lot of times when I speak, there's like 400,000 people or whatever where I don't get an opportunity to say hello or at least connect individually. So this is really nice that it's like a small group. We get to know each other a little bit better, and I'd love to see how I can help you, potentially serve you down the road too. All right, so a little bit of my story. So the first thing you should know about me is I failed kindergarten. Okay, I'm not proud of that fact. It's not a hard grade. It's like stacking blocks, not eating the glue. I had my daughter recently graduated from kindergarten with honors, by the way, which is like awesome. I don't know if you know, like they do a graduation for kindergarten, the caps and gowns and that song, that marching song that sounds like the violin is marching, Pomp and Circumstance or whatever that song is. And they march forward and they're like, my daughter's class had 4 kids in it. She was in the top 2, graduated with honors. I'm like, she's brilliant. Chip off the old block right there. And I'm like taking pictures of her and I'm like kind of really kind of, just kind of blown away by how smart my kid is. And at the same time, kind of blown away about how dumb you have to be to fail this grade, okay? And I was looking back on my life and I'm like, that's fascinating. Like eventually I learned how to graduate from kindergarten, made my way through college, which is a minor miracle, made it in the Marine Corps, which if you understand the Marine Corps' entrance standards, you will not be impressed with at all. Literally, the Marine Corps is like, as long as you have a heartbeat and you graduated, they're like, you're good, we'll teach you the rest of the stuff. I actually think like sometimes the lower the better, because then you just do what they say. But that's just my opinion. And then I ended up in the military. And I actually turned out to be a really good pilot. Like I didn't know how a kid that failed kindergarten could be such a good pilot, but I just figured it out. And I will just tell you, despite the movies and despite everybody says you need to have some sort of engineering degree, I will tell you, sometimes the less brilliant you are, the better pilot you are, because some of the hardest things in life can actually be executed as long as you know how to make them simple. So for example, do you want to know how to fly the F-18? I could give it to you in 3 sentences. It's very simple. When you push the stick forward, the houses get bigger, okay? When you pull the stick back, the houses get smaller. See, I'm telling you guys, when you push the red button on the stick, all the houses go away, okay? That's all you need to know. It's so simple. See, I just told you how simple it was, right? So I ended up in a Marine Corps squadron, in and out of combat in Iraq, ended up as a graduated from Top Gun, like the actual Top Gun school. It was very different than the movie. And then I ended up as an instructor for the Marine Corps at our version of the weapons school. So that's what I did. And then all of a sudden I got out. I was starting to have kids and decided to move on. And when I got out, the airlines were not hiring pilots, and I didn't want to be an airline pilot anyway. So I started writing books and I started businesses. Actually, my first business, I started teaching people how to become a fighter pilot. Literally wrote a book and some CDs. That turned into this six-figure business. Then I started another business. Some of you who are basketball fans recognize the name Ed Rush. My dad was a really famous basketball referee. So I started a course with him, teaching basketball referees how to be great basketball referees. To this day, that's still like a $250,000 a year business. And then as I was growing businesses and selling companies, I started going and speaking to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are like my folks. If you're an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial, in other words, if you eat what you kill, you're my kind of person, right? I think the whole world, just so you know, the whole world operates based on entrepreneurial ideas and enthusiasm. The government does the opposite. The government will slow things down. The government doesn't produce anything. I put people into 2 categories. I put people into creator or consumer, okay? And I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying there's a group of people that create. Entrepreneurs always create more than we consume. And there's a consumption class as well. And you can figure out which one the government's in, but I will just tell you, I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. because one of my visions is to transform government, the way we govern. And there's nothing created. Just so you know, there's nothing created in D.C. There's no industry. There's no manufacturing. There's nothing that gets created. It's just consumed, okay? And I'm not trying to be that critical of the government. It is our government. We're supposed to pray for them. But at the same time, we're supposed to be able to make a change. And that's my vision for what I'm doing down the road. But since I started those 2 businesses, I've been speaking and working with entrepreneurs. Literally, this is probably well over my thousandth. See, sometimes the words don't even come out right, just so you know. I don't spell properly. I had a whole 4 editors for my last book. Okay, 4 editors. Most people have 1. I'm like literally the whole document. You know those red lines and the green lines that show up? I didn't have any words that didn't have lines underneath them, okay? That's the way my talks are too. So if you're like a grammaticist, or like you're like English, lit, master's degree, you may have a challenge with my approach towards English, okay? But if you're ready to hear some great strategies on how to make more money, have a bigger impact, and take more time off, then give me a hoorah. There it is right there. That's a Marine Corps hoorah. We're going to do this. We're going to do this tomorrow for a little bit louder, just for more fun. All right, so a little bit more. So I ended up, as an entrepreneur, ended up writing 6 books teaching entrepreneurs. And like I said, the people that I love working with are people who eat what they kill. And I say it that way because, number one, it's true, and number two, it's fun to say it that way because you're like, you know what? That's the world that we live in. Like, we live in a world that where money follows value. Did you catch that? We live in a world where money follows value. It's something, one of the most important things you can know about business. And so if you provide value, you should be able to create a really great income. Okay? So that's a little bit of my story. I do events all around the world. And the other part of my story, which is kind of interesting, is I don't know how many of you have like a church background or like a religious background. I'm just going to assume quite a few of you. But I grew up in like the very traditional church, okay, the very traditional American church. I'm still a member of the church, so you know, like I still go to church on Sundays and everything. But I will tell you that as I grew as an entrepreneur and I started to understand more about money, because if you're an entrepreneur, you have to like make more than you spend, you know? And you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to like encourage other people to give you some. You know, it's like one of those things, like you actually have to ask for the sale. And what I realized was my traditional upbringing in the church, when it came to money, like a lot of the things I learned in the church were very helpful, you know, really helpful. But I will just say fully transparently, what I learned in the church regarding money was the opposite of helpful. Just so you know, it was actually the opposite of what the Bible even teaches about money. Like, I'm not, just say this, I hope you don't get offended. By the way, you and I can disagree on things, just so you know. I'm going to share some things over the next few days. You may agree with 90 or 95% of what I say. We live in a culture now where people don't like to disagree. I think sometimes disagreement is like one of the best things you can do. I just had one of my students come to me and say, hey, you know that thing you say about this? He goes, actually, this is, and oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. I didn't even realize that. Like, now we're getting better, okay? So I'm going to say something, and if you disagree with me, that's fine. It's fine. You have my permission to do that. But what I'm telling you is my experience when I grew up in that traditional sort of like church environment when it came to money, the church acted and thought, frankly, more like a cult than it did a church when it came to money, okay? So I will simply tell you, the reason why there's wealth piled in places in bad people's hands right now. So some of you know this Proverbs. The sinner's wealth is, anybody know the end of it? The sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So according to that verse, the natural flow of money should be from bad people to good people, right? So why do all these awful people have all the money? Okay, there's only one answer to that question, which is that good people are rejecting it when God tries to send it their way. Right? And so what I realized is I started growing up in this system. What I realized as an entrepreneur, like when I started making money, like when I started really making money, like 7 figures a year kind of money as an entrepreneur, I also started feeling what? Guilty. You know how messed up that is? You're making money, helping people, changing the world. And I'm not even exaggerating. One day I'm sitting in my office. I sit up on this hill, like kind of like this. There's this road that goes through town, and there's a police car flying through town. I remember sitting in my chair, having a little Bible study or something like that, and I remember thinking to myself, I hope they're not coming for me. Now, just so you know, I had not done anything wrong, right? I mean, that's not totally true. I go faster than the speed limit, okay? So just so you know, it's hard. So I used to have this like collector's edition Corvette, and I was a fighter pilot, so I have a high view of my ability to manage speed, okay? So I do not drive the speed limit. You can ask any of my family members what they think about that. So for me to say to you, I hadn't done anything wrong is not true. I go faster than the speed limit, more than 7 miles an hour past the speed limit, you know? Everything else, though, I was good. So why did I feel like I was getting arrested? Because I had been taught growing up that money is the what? Is the root of all evil, people. Like, think about this for a second. If money is the root of all evil, why would I want any? Because I don't want to be evil, right? Just, you know, that verse is not a verse. You understand that? That verse comes from the pit of hell and smells like smoke, okay? The real verse says, the love of money is the root of all kinds. There's whole phrases left out, okay? But I was taught, hey, you know, money is the root of all evil, and you wouldn't want that. And so really good people reject it. And because really good people reject it, it goes into the hands of really horrible people. And like when you look at our culture right now, it's not hard to see that really horrible people have a lot of money, and it's created an effect, okay? So what makes a plane fly? Money. So if you want to solve, let me give you an example. Let's say you want to solve the issue of human trafficking, which is a major issue in our country. If you want to solve the issue of fentanyl coming across our border, which is, look, I have 2 siblings that have passed away. 2 that have passed away from drug overdose. Major issue, right? If you want to solve one of those problems, you can pray about it because prayer actually does things. And you can talk about it on your Twitter feed because that actually helps too. Or you could take $1 billion of your dollars and put it to the problem. I'm not saying that one is more effective than the others, but this is the one in our world that actually solves problems. So if you want to solve problems, acquire wealth and help other people acquire wealth. And that's why I really honor what you guys do. You follow me on this? I don't think there's anyone on the forefront of this issue. What I'm trying to show you is what you do doesn't just change people's lives. It doesn't just change their future. It changes cultures. You catch me on that? So what you do is actually, I'm just going to say it because I believe it, okay? I think being a pastor and being a missionary is a good godly calling. I'm not saying that it's not, okay? What I am telling you is that if you took those folks off of the planet for a little while, not much would change, okay? However, if you took entrepreneurs, salespeople, if we took people like you who teach people how to use and think about money well, a lot would change. And so I actually believe what you do is the single most honorable, highest calling you can have on planet Earth. It's not second. It's not second. And by the way, that whole belief of sort of like a higher calling or whatever isn't even in there. Okay? Now, so are you having fun yet? If you are, say hoorah. I'm gonna read this part of my book. I wasn't planning on this, but I have this whole part of my book. I'm gonna give you one of these, by the way. Actually, it's not even me that's gonna give it to you. I'll tell you about this in a second. So I go in this book, I talk about how business reflects the nature of God. And then I go into all these categories. God's a provider, God's a creator, God's a restorer, and talk about all these business industries that reflect the nature of God. Check this out. God is a restorer. So if your business involves restoring, you reflect God's image. That includes insurance salespeople. Did you catch this in there? You're in there, okay? Hold on. So occupational therapists, physical therapists, doctors, nurses, medical staff, plumbers, electricians, veterinarians, and mold removers. Now, this is in the book, it's probably worth pausing for a moment because many people laugh when I say that insurance salespeople can reflect the nature of God. I get it, but then again, have you ever submitted an insurance claim? And I go on to talk about how I had a renter burn one of my houses to the ground, and USAA sent me a check like a week later. It was like a $170,000 check, like literally a week later, and they're like, hey, you can now rebuild your house. And I was like, thank you. I was really thankful for that because I didn't feel like spending $170,000. And I tell that story on page 192. Okay, so I'm gonna challenge you tonight to see if you can get all the way to 192. Okay, so the other part of the story, and then I'll wrap because I know you guys are gonna get. And we'll just have some fun tomorrow. We'll talk about money tomorrow. By the way, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about money to go into a little bit more detail on what I was just talking about. I'm gonna explode a myth that many people who you work with are taught. By the way, here's the myth: the most important thing you can do with your money is give it away. Now, I know some like whole question marks just popped over a bunch of people's heads. So I'm going to talk about the honor and the value of giving in the context of the honor and value of saving, of the honor and value of investing, and a whole bunch of other things included with that, okay? Because people are multifaceted. What they should be doing with their money is multifaceted. And right now, a lot of people think, oh, that's the only thing that's good, but that's not, right? A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children is also in there too, right? So we'll talk a little bit about money. We'll also talk a little bit about some communication stuff, which is one of the things I love when I talk to entrepreneurs. How do you communicate in such a way, not only to get someone interested in what you have, but how do you communicate in such a way that positions you as the expert so people actually come to you instead of you needing them to go to them? How many of you would like to create a system where people just automatically raise their hand and come to you? If you do, say hoorah. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow too. All right, so the other part of the story, and I'll do this in like 3 minutes, Scott, and then I'll just wrap up, is this. My theology I grew up with was I was a person who did not believe that God, frankly, was all that interested in like the day-to-day of your life. And then God started speaking to me. I started having a conversation with God. And it kind of freaked me out, actually, at first. And then eventually that conversation led into a business conversation. I would start hearing things in my conversations regarding business deals, regarding people, and it was accurate, like too accurate not to be valuable. And then I didn't want to talk about it because it was a little strange to me at the time. And I had someone come to me and fairly strongly rebuke me and say, like, God gave you this gift and you haven't told anyone about it. And so I started at my events, which are business events, and I have all walks of life come to my events, by the way. I do have some Christians there, but I have like atheists, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, skeptics, everything in between, New Agey people. And I started teaching people at my events. I'm like, here's how I ask God questions about my business and get answers. And people started journaling. I would always do this exercise. People started journaling. And the first event, I had an atheist, a woman who's an atheist, walk up to me with 2 pages of notes. And she said to me, I have 2 pages. She said, I'm an atheist, and I have 2 pages of notes from God. She said, how does that work? And I said, well, I'm in like, Francine, like, you're the atheist. You tell me how that works. Like, your question, not my question, okay? So like, and I've seen unbelievable breakthrough. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, and it's okay, by the way, if this isn't how you've grown in your faith, but I've literally seen people physically healed at my business events just because they reset their conversation with God and their body reset simply right after that. And so I wrote this book called God Talks. And essentially, it's a book on how to ask God questions about your business and get answers. And there's 2 ways to buy the book, by the way. You can buy it on Amazon for $20, or you can buy it from me for $20. So what are the 2 ways? You can buy it from Amazon for $20, or you can buy it from me for $20. I heard this line yesterday. I thought it was great. It's like a love offering. You're offering your love to me by giving me $20 for this book. So I'm just kidding. Option 3 is you can have it for free. Which one do you want? You can have it for free. Okay, so here's the deal. So Scott and Mark decided to buy, they bought these for you. Okay, so it's not even me giving the book to you. It's your guy, okay? Your guy's right here who bought this book for you. It's their gift to you just to honor you for showing up here. And my challenge to you is read the first 3 chapters. Check it out. The first chapter is a page. The second chapter is also a page. And the third chapter is like 4 or 5 pages. And my challenge to you is before tomorrow, read the first 3 chapters, all right? You got me on that? If you do, say hoorah. All right. These are up here. You're welcome to grab one. I will sign it. Whatever that does to the value, it's up to you, okay? Who knows? Who knows? You know, someday if I'm president, it could be worth $40 or something, you know? So, yes, sir.
Before you,
yeah.
You take as much time as you want, but I want you to tell, because I want all these folks to fly row 1. So will you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So on row 1, so the short version is I had a client 7 or 8 years ago. I had a client that's probably worth at the time $3 to $4 million, like net worth thing. His business that I was helping him with was about $1.5 million a year. And we were in a conference room and he said, you know what, I just want, he said, all I want is just to be able to fly first class. That's all I want, is just to be able to fly first class. And I was like, Mike, you know you can fly first class. Like, you don't have to wait for them to upgrade you. You can just buy the ticket if you want to, you know? And the moment I said that to him, I realized I was going to give myself that advice too, okay? And I'm not telling you what to do when it comes to flying. I'm just simply saying I really enjoy the travel, and I really enjoy the travel because I'm not sitting next to Bubba in seat 27B, arm wrestling, you know, for the armrest or whatever. So I typically always fly there. And I like row 1 because row 1, I like to sit on the window because I like to see the landscape go by because I'm a pilot. But row 1, you can get up and go to the bathroom without annoying the person sleeping next to you. Okay, so I sit on the window in row 1. Don't take my seat. I'm just telling you that's where I was. So I was out in 1F, which is the right-hand side. Scott's in 1D, which is the left-hand side. We're sitting next to each other. And I will just tell you, don't judge me on this one. I don't talk to people, okay? I don't want to. I have a great set of noise reduction headphones. I have a companion I always travel with. It's the book I chose to travel with that trip, okay? And whatever that book is, like I'm reading your mentor's book right now on infinite banking. Like I'm interested, by the way, just so you know, in this concept. This is a brilliant. Side note, I'm very, very interested in this. And I have tens of thousands of entrepreneurs that follow me. I told Scott, I'm like, we're going to start talking to these folks about this because like tomorrow I'll talk about how to market against a big amorphous blob. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful big amorphous blob to market against, which is who? The banks. Anytime you say banks, people are like, I hate the banks too. Like, you don't even have to convince them. So my point is, like, it's going to be very helpful. Anyway, we're sitting next to each other. I don't ever talk to anybody. And for some reason, we started talking to each other. And I was like, you know, interested in the conversation, which is like, first of all, I don't talk to anyone because I don't feel like it. Second, I know they're like, you know, never miss a meal with someone. I'm like, I don't do networking. I'm kind of an introvert. I'm like, look, if they don't want to come to me, fine, whatever. So I'm sitting there, and next thing you know, we start having a conversation, and we start talking, and Scott starts talking about this idea of infinite banking. I'm like, oh yeah, I've already looked into that, started studying that, and then we exchanged cards. So the first miracle you should know is that we even talked, okay? I'm sure he's way more extroverted than I am, but I'm like, I don't even want to like get the book out, don't talk, okay? So where are you from? Don't even respond, you know? Okay, so then the second thing is, I will just tell you full disclosure, and I don't really mean to sound like such a horrible jerk, I'm just saying this is the way I am, is I get like a lot of business cards, okay? And I don't do anything with the business cards. So I used to like have them and then I'd bring them home and then they would sit there and then I wouldn't do anything with them. So then I just started throwing the business cards away. And it's like normally it's not long after the business card that it gets tossed, right? So Scott's like, hey man, let's connect. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. And I stuck the business card in my thing. And I was interested, just so you know, I wasn't going to blow him off, but with my personality type, it was probably going to happen anyway, okay? And so Scott, so Scott and I think we exchanged information or something like that. And I got off the airplane and I woke up the next morning and I was just sitting there praying. And I'm not exaggerating. This is what I was told. I was sitting there journaling and God said, you pay attention to this man. That's what he said to me. He goes, you pay attention to this man. And I think it's because he knew that I like to blow people off that he said, you pay attention to this man. So we talked like a week later or whatever, jumped on Zoom, started explaining some of the concepts. I'm a client, okay, so I am coming on board. I'm not just a like speaker, okay? This is something that is really interesting to me. And you got a great guy here teaching you this stuff because he knows that. Now, the other lesson I will tell you is if you want to talk to affluent people, you're probably going to have a better chance of that in seat 1D than you are back in seat 27B, okay? So it's not that much more, and it's a lot better experience, and I think that's the last thing that I'll say about that. So look, don't be cheap on your way to success, okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to be around affluent people, then maybe you should be around the affluent people, you know? So we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. Is there anything else you wanted me to? All right, so what do we...
One other thing. Okay, that's been a few years ago. Since that time, we've now grown, so we actually have a row 1 club. So it costs if you identify a HVT, high value target, right? Somebody high net worth client you want to get to know. It costs $2-3 grand to do that. Okay, with quality correspondence or however, getting past gatekeepers, all that kind of stuff. A row 1 ticket is about $2,500. I'd recommend flying Delta, but it's about $2,500, and it is the best use of your money. And so for me, when I fly, that is an opportunity for me to meet a friend. Now, if your idea is I just want to meet a new client, I think you're going to fall on your face. But if you say, I'm genuinely interested in people. I may meet me a friend today. And Ed became my friend. So it was just, I highly recommend try it once and shoot me an email and tell me what.
So can I throw one more thing onto that? So first of all, so I just searched kayak for the lowest first class route wherever I'm going, okay? The second thing is I do this for a living, right? So I speak for a living. A lot of times what I'll do is when I'm talking to the client, is I will say, this is what I tell the client. I said, I fly first class. I said, I know that you don't normally pay for that. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I'll end up paying for it. I said, but the last thing you want is your expensive speaker sitting back in 27B with your attendees walking by like, why is the speaker sitting back there? And a lot of times they're like, okay, yeah, we'll pay for it. And what he said is right, by the way, which is if you're an affluent individual, you can smell, what's the halitosis thing, whatever you call it, sales breath or whatever. So what Scott did, what Scott did is what you should do, which is you're meeting a friend, you're meeting someone that you like to know more about, and here's the other thing too, he was interested in helping me with my business, like I'm here, you know what I mean? So I work with people who invest in me, you know, like the team members that I'm bringing on. My business is growing really fast right now. The team members that I'm bringing on, I just brought on a brand new audio guy to do all the background. I have all these guided conversations with God that I'm creating and that have music in the background. The guy that I just hired to do all the music has been in my community as one of my coaches for the last year because I'm invested in people who are invested, like they know the story, they're in that. So there's something to that relationship that is actually really important. You will say yes to your friends, you know? But if you think someone's a salesperson, and tomorrow I'm going to talk about the difference between being an annoying pest and a welcome guest. And by the way, it could be the same product you're selling, but this one the person's like, look, you know, well, we'll get back to you. No, you won't, you know? Or someone who's like, hey, when are you going to finally tell me about that? There's a huge difference about that. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. Is that helpful for Wednesday? Hoorah. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Go get a book.